Hello there everyone, this is Dove again, and in this series of videos I thought I would show you how I make my homemade overnight hand cream. And this will probably be like a 3 or 4 part series because it's quite time consuming to make this. And so in this first part I will just explain the difference between a lotion and a cream and go over the basic ingredients. And so a lotion at its very basic core is just water and oil. And of course water and oil don't mix very well, and so you have to have an emulsifying ingredient. And so you've got lecithin, emulsifying wax, and beeswax. Those are all emulsifying ingredients. And so very basic. That's all you have to do: water, oil, and something to emulsify it, and that makes a lotion. And I'm going to be formulating a daytime light lotion for when I go out west, but for right now I've just perfected an overnight hand cream, which I only have to use once a day. I put it on right at night before I go to bed, and it sinks in over the hours. It does take quite a few hours, which is why it's overnight. You wouldn't want to put it on during the day. But what makes it a cream is that you go through and you add these butters. You can also add lanolin, but this is what makes it a cream. It thickens it up and it makes it more luxurious and moisturizing. And so that's the only difference between a lotion and a cream, is the addition of those heavy butters. And so yeah, those are my essential oils. I got a lot of those. And so for the water portion, you want to use distilled water only. You have to use distilled water to keep out all those contaminants. And then anything that's water-based, so you've got glycerin, honey, and aloe. And then those are my plant parts that I will infuse into the water, and I'll do that in the second part of the series. You don't actually have to infuse any plants. You could just use straight water. I choose to use all those plants because they have healing properties, and my overnight hand cream is for very severe dry skin, either to treat it or to prevent it, because normally I make it and start using it before I need it, but sometimes, like right now, I've waited too long, and I don't know if that'll show up on camera. This is what happens in the winter if I don't use my overnight hand cream. And it's pretty late. We're here at the end of November, and I should have made this, 3 weeks ago, but I've been doing other things. Okay, so that's the water portion, and then the oil portion is obviously just oil. But over here we've got these light oils. These are very light on the skin, and they will absorb much quicker. And so if you were making a daytime lotion, you would only want to choose from these oils: camelina, almond, sunflower, jojoba, grapeseed, apricot kernel, hazelnut. All of these are really good for a light daytime lotion. And then over here in the kind of medium, light to medium, is macadamia nut and hemp seed oil. And then over here, these are the heavy oils, and you would definitely not want to use these in a daytime lotion because they take forever to soak in. And so we've got shea nut oil, avocado, olive oil, coconut, castor. Those are all very heavy oils, and you would just not include them in a daytime lotion. Regardless of how healing they are, you would just try to avoid those. But I do use these in my nighttime lotion, or cream, sorry. And then these are my specialty oils, and it doesn't really matter whether they're heavy or light to me. I use them for the medicinal purposes, and actually vitamin E oil is a natural preservative. And so regardless of whether they're heavy or light, I still use these oils. Alright, so those are the basic ingredients. And then in my cream, I add a butter. I do add lanolin, and then I also add lecithin. And in my creams, I use this vegetable emulsifying wax. You can use beeswax, but for lotions and creams, I prefer the e-wax. It's not quite as heavy. Beeswax has a really heavy feel to it. And then the sunflower lecithin is what I use, again, to thicken it up and to help emulsify it. And what else do I need to tell you? Oh, these things, the butters, and also the e-wax and the lecithin, these all count towards my oil portion. And so you've still only got two things, water portion and an oil portion. But the oil portion will include all of this. And then at the very end, I add the essential oils also to the oil portion because they're pretty much oil based. Okay, so in this next part, I will go ahead and make my water infusion and let that sit overnight. And then in part 3, hopefully it will only take 3 parts. I will go ahead and combine the water portion with my oil portion. But like I said, it might turn into 4 parts. It depends on how much I talk, I guess. Alright, so I will see you in the next video. Bye. Okay, so here is the equipment that I normally use when I'm making my homemade creams. I thought I would just go over that real quick. Hopefully it's real quick. So I've got my scales here, and I use these scales to weigh out my plant parts and also the butters and the lanolins, the solid ingredients. And so I use 2 different ones because this one does my grams, very, very small amounts of grams, which is what I use for my plant parts. And then this one does ounces, which is how I weigh out my lanolin and my butters and everything. And it goes down to 0.05 ounces. And the reason I have to use this in conjunction with this is because my kitchen scale, which does both grams and ounces, it actually goes down to only 0.10, and when I have to measure out like 1/4 of an ounce, my kitchen scale won't work. So for right now, unless I can find something that's even better than my kitchen scale, this is what I have to do. I have to use 2 different scales in the same recipe. And then I also use varying sizes of measuring cups. That's 2 cups, and that's 1 cup. I like this one a lot because the measurements are actually engraved rather than printed on, because these Pyrex cups, while they're very nice, the printing starts to come off after a time, after you wash it a few times. And then I use these little condiment cups to measure out my herbs and also my butters. So I've got 2 of those. And then I use these tablespoon measuring spoon sets, and they're really nice. This one goes from 1/8 of a teaspoon up to a tablespoon, and it's got everything in between. And then this is a real special set. It's a 2/3, 1.5 teaspoon, 2/3 teaspoon, 1.5 teaspoon, and 2 teaspoons, which I bought them initially because I bake a lot, and sometimes I have a lot of oddball measurements, and so they come in useful for a lot of things. But then I found this, which is an OXO brand measuring cup, and now I almost always use this instead of these, although I do have to use the very smallest, the 1/8 and 1/4 of a teaspoon. But for my oils and stuff, I use a bunch of different oils in my creams, but I use a very small amount of each one, and it's usually like 1/4 of an ounce, and I don't know if you can see that in there, but the smallest measurement down there is 1/4 of an ounce, and then goes up to 2 ounces. And it's got this nice pour spout and everything. I absolutely love this thing, and it's like under $10. And so that's what I use for measuring just about everything. And then I've got this nice silicone, again from OXO. No, I'm not sponsoring them, but I should be. Nice silicone spatula, and it does everything I need. It's really stiff, and so I can scrape out the oils from there, and I can also use it to scrape out the lotion from my jar, which this is the jar that I make the lotion in. It's a halfway between a pint jar and a quart jar. It's just a regular canning jar. It's a 24-ounce canning jar. It's a specialty size, but I find that very useful when I'm making a half batch of my recipe. And see, I first started out making a batch that yielded about 25 ounces by weight, and so when I made it, I had to make it here in this food processor because there was just so much, and then there's just the regular blade in there. But it would fill up this whole thing. But then I realized when I was making them, I would generally only need half of the batch. And so I continued to use that. But then I realized that I really didn't even have to do that. And so now instead of using the food processor, I use this immersion blender. And that's what I would recommend if you're doing small amounts. And then I just mix it up right here in this jar. And it used to be that I would have a small 1-cup Pyrex, and that's what I would heat my oils up in, and I would heat my water portion up in this. But then when I switched how I actually do the end product, I found that I can just measure out the oils straight into here and do my water portion in here and then heat them up in a double boiler that way. And so I don't actually use a double boiler. This is my Visions cookware glass pot, and this is like a little hard boiled egg cooker that you just sit down in there, and I just use it as a trivet, and so it kind of creates a double boiler effect. And so I use this pot for two different things. When I'm doing my infusion with my water, I do that in this pot, and that takes about 12 hours. And then I dump that out into this. Actually, this is the other thing you'll need. It's a strainer and a pot that is deep enough so that when it's straining out, the liquid doesn't go above your strainer. So I know that my finished product is not going to go, above 6 cups. And so that's why I need such a big measuring cup and a big colander. And then I line the colander with butter muslin. You could also use cheesecloth, but I like this a lot better. It's a lot finer weave. And so, I make the infusion in here, I dump it out in here, I let it drain, I clean out this pot, and then the next day, or however many hours later, I put this down in there, and it becomes my double boiler. And then when I'm heating up my oil and my water portion, they just fit right in there. And then the oil will go in there and the water will go in there, and then when I'm ready to combine them, all I have to do is put the stick blender down in here and start slowly adding the water portion. And if you do it in a food processor, you actually have to do it the opposite way. You put the water portion down in there and you turn on the unit and you slowly pour the oil into here. But that's actually really a hard way to do it. I much prefer doing it this way because you put the oil in here, you put your stick blender in, you start blending that, and then you pour your water in. And by experience, I just know that this is much easier. And so unless I have big batches of lotion to do, I probably won't ever use my food processor to do this again. I'll probably just stick to my immersion blender. Alright, I think that was it. That's all the equipment that I use in general. There might have been something that I missed, but you'll catch that in other videos, I'm sure. Alright, I mean it this time. I'm done. Peace out. See you in the next video.